Hello everyone. The topic that I would like to discuss with you today is about virtue ethics. As an introduction, in this theory, the concern has shifted from the fundamental question in ethics of what should I do or how should I do, but this time in this theory, the question is what kind of person should I be? So, at to start with, let us understand the meaning of virtue ethics. Virtue ethics is a broad term for theories that emphasize the role of character and virtue in moral philosophy, rather than either doing one's duty or acting in order to bring about good consequences. So here, what is mentioned in the previous theory is about the Kantian ethics, which is duty ethics, and the ethics of utilitarianism, because it speaks of good consequences. So here, according to Aristotle, by honing virtuous habits, people will likely make the right choice when faced with ethical challenges. To understand further, when we speak of virtues are attitudes, dispositions, or character traits that enable us to be and to act in ways that develop this potential. They enable us to pursue the ideals we have adopted. So, virtues are habits that is once they are acquired, they become characteristic of a person. And at the heart of this virtue ethics approach is that idea that this ethics is developed in a community. No, a person's character traits are not developed in isolation, but within and by the communities to which he or she belongs, including the family, in the church, in school, and other private or public associations. So as people grow and mature, their personalities are deeply affected by the values that their communities prize, by the personality traits that their communities encourage, and by the role models that their communities put forth for imitation through traditional stories, fiction movies, televisions, and so on and so forth. So the moral life is not simply a matter of following moral rules and of learning to apply them to specific situations, but the moral life is also a matter of trying to determine the kind of person you should be and of attending to the development of character within the communities and in yourself. So in short, virtue ethics is person rather than action based. It looks at the moral character of the person carrying out an action. Now, what is the nature of virtue? So, ethics is not merely a theoretical study for Aristotle. Unlike any intellectual capacity, virtues of character are dispositions to act in certain ways in response to similar situations, the habits of behaving in a certain way, not just in a single instance, but in situations where you are doing the same good act in different situations, because that is what is this theory all about. No, so when you speak of virtue, it is a state of being that naturally seeks its mean. So what does this mean? According to Aristotle, the virtuous habit of action is always an intermediate state between the opposed vices of excess and deficiency. Too much and too little are always wrong for Aristotle. The right kind of action always lies in the mean. So for example, with respect to acting in the face of danger, no, you have to have this courage, because courage is a mean between the excess of rashness and the deficiency. So in short, we have to avoid both extremes. So to live a virtuous life is to live a happy life, no, and to live a happy life is to also live according to the golden mean, living in moderation. Now in this theory, we cannot but talk also achieving happiness. So according to Aristotle, genuine happiness lies in action that leads to virtue, since this alone provides true value and not just amusement. Therefore, for Aristotle, uh, he held that contemplation is the highest form of moral activity because it is a continuous, pleasant, self-sufficient, and complete. So here, when we talk of a virtuous life, it is a life lived in uh, happiness, and it is achieved by the contemplation of according to our nature as a human being, that is the capacity to reason. So when we exercise the capacity to our reason, it is also living a virtuous life that which makes us happy. In this theory also, it talks of the weakness of the will, no? So for Aristotle, doing the right thing is not always so simple. Even though few people deliberately choose to develop vicious habits, Aristotle sharply disagreed with Socrates' belief that knowing what is right always results in doing it. So the great enemy of moral conduct on Aristotle's view is precisely the failure to behave well, even on those occasions when one's deliberation has resulted in clear knowledge of what is right. So in this, the point here is that it does not follow that if you know what is right or wrong, that you will also do it or follow what you know is right or wrong, no? It is still again involves the constant practice developing this virtue. So here is the principle of virtue ethics. An action is only right if it is an action that a virtuous person would carry out in the same circumstances. And a virtuous person is a person who has and live the virtues. So it is a habit, so you have to exert an effort for us. Self-discipline to develop this virtue. A virtue is a moral characteristic that a person needs to live well. Okay? At this point, let's talk about the strengths of virtue ethics. Number one is the holistic view of human nature. So here, it does not consider only ethics having only the practical knowledge of using our reasoning, but it includes emotion in the building of character. Number two, it is character based. So the habits of character are central and developed through training. And number three, morality as a social construct. So virtue ethics sees morality as grounded in a view of human nature and the social concept of the good life. And lastly, partiality. So unlike Kant, because and also John Stuart Mill, because in their ethics, in their theory, it requires impartiality, but here, according to an author in the person of James Rachel, he commented that it may be doubted whether impartiality is really such an important feature of the moral life, because some virtues are partial and some are not. Like for example, love and friendship involves partiality towards loved ones and friends, no? Beneficence towards people in general is also a virtue. What is needed is not some general requirement of impartiality, but an understanding of how the different virtues relate to each other. So here is also the weaknesses of virtue ethics. Number one, it is relativistic. So the main point here is that in this theory fails to avoid relativism. Number two, Borges, no? Bertrand Russell argued that Aristotle's virtues were Borges virtues, no? A Victorian suspicion of extreme passion and emotion, no? In other words, there is a complete absence of benevolence and philanthropy. Number three, decisions are difficult, no? It is not obvious how we should go about deciding what to do. And number four, conflicting virtues, no? Meaning, what happens when virtues conflict? For example, when honesty and kindness conflict, or honesty and loyalty to one's friend. So it only leaves you wondering which virtue takes precedence. So virtue ethics has the problem of application. It does not tell us what to do in particular instances in which we most need direction. That is all for my simple discussion about this theory. If you have questions or clarifications, feel free to message me. Thank you for